With Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
It wasn't a win, but it's still a victory. Tonight, the new leader of the federal Green Party, Annamie Paul, on her impressive second-place finish in this week's by-election and where she intends to take her party next. Then, our Ontario hubs explore whether container farming can help address food security in parts of this province. And from sizing up the provincial government's COVID-19 messaging to whether Canada should leave the monarchy behind, we've got the Agenda's Week in Review. It's Friday, October 30th. I'm Annamie Kiwanuka, and that's all ahead on the agenda. It's harder to lead a political party without having a seat in office. So, when the riding that the newly minted leader of the Green Party of Canada ran in last time came open, Annamie Paul leapt at it. And although she didn't win, she made huge gains this week in that Toronto Centre by-election to replace former Liberal Federal Finance Minister Bill Morneau. And that was less than a few weeks after winning her party's top job, no less. With us now to reflect on her very busy month of October and beyond, there's Annamie Paul in the provincial capital. Hi, Annamie.
Hello.
So excited to speak to you. You had quite a busy month. At the beginning, you were chosen to be the federal leader of the Green Party, and you made history as you became the first Black permanent leader of a major federal political party in Canada and the second Jewish person to lead. Can you take us back to those last few moments before you found out that you won and what it felt like when you realized that you did win?
There was a lot of drama. We had this very complicated system where we were going to find out if we had won or not, and there were significant delays. And for a while there, we thought that we had lost. And so I was just walking around the room reassuring people that it would be okay and life would go on. And we were taken down. We still didn't know. I mean, we got the results when others did. And it was emotional. It's during COVID. My mom wasn't able to be there. My son was not able to be there. So it added, I would say, some additional emotion to the moment. It hit me just for one little second, and I didn't have much time to think about it afterward, but that something historic had happened. And that was really, whatever else happens, there's this little thing that has changed forever in Canadian politics, and being a part of that, I think that's the thing that really hit home at that moment. It was very emotional for me.
It seems as if you've been working towards this moment your whole life when you look at your resume. On a personal note, what did it mean to you to make history?
Yeah, the first thing I did after I finished graduate school was to come back to Canada and to found an institute focused on advancing knowledge and also getting more people of color, people from marginalized groups elected. So I think that I understand more than most what a difference it makes. It's not just something that feels good, and it does feel good, but it's something that really changes the political landscape. It gets voters involved. It keeps our democracy strong. And so for me, knowing that I had made it easier for people that hadn't seen themselves reflected to imagine themselves in politics, whether elected or otherwise, that is wonderful. And that is something that everyone in Canada should feel good about. And I definitely do.
Well, after you became leader, the campaigning didn't stop. You jumped into a by-election for a seat in Toronto Centre. That seat has been a Liberal stronghold for some 25 years. Why Toronto Centre?
Actually 27. It's been held uninterruptedly for 27 years. And this was just, I describe it really as a matter of the heart. I ask everyone, what would they do? If they had run previously in a riding, if they had been born in a riding and their family had spent most of their working life in that riding, and if you'd seen it in decline, and if you had an opportunity to use your newfound role to try to help and to offer a real choice, what would you do? For me, there was only one option, and that was to run. And so I knew that it was going to be really tough. The whole team did, but that's never deterred Greens from putting themselves forward. And I have absolutely no regrets about it. It was absolutely the right thing to do.
Seeing that you do have a personal connection to the riding, how did you take the loss then?
Well, even you look, we wanted to win, and it's something that's very important for people to know. We were definitely running to win. But what I do know is that the race was a lot harder, that all of the parties, the major parties, had to take it much more seriously because we put up a very strong race. We were very competitive. It meant that everyone needed to pay attention to the issues. I know that it means, and I congratulate Marcy on winning, but I know that it means that she's going to have to work that much harder because people in Toronto Centre sent a very clear message that they do want change. And whoever represents them has that little bit of extra impetus to make sure that they get it. So that's already a win for people in Toronto Centre, even though I didn't win.
We've been hearing a lot about people who are frustrated with how politics looks right now, and the criticism that there's a lack of civility in politics. Why did you congratulate Marcy?
Because I, at the end of the day, if it's really about the people, then whomever they select, you want them to succeed. And Marcy is someone now who is the member of parliament for Toronto Centre, and I want her to succeed. I want to make sure that if I can help her, or volunteers who live in Toronto Centre can help her, that they do. And also, it's just good manners. I mean, my family, we're from little islands in the Caribbean. I was born here, but they're from little islands in the Caribbean, and good manners is just part of the way I was raised. So.
Well, the NDP and Liberals chose to run candidates in the race, ignoring what is known as leader's courtesy. Your former leader, Elizabeth May, criticized NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, saying he was blocking your historic entry into the House of Commons. What did you make of that?
I understand. Elizabeth is fierce and wonderful, and certainly I wasn't part of the Green Party when we stepped aside to support Jagmeet getting into Parliament. But I can understand that frustration that she and others have had. I knew there was going to be a full slate of candidates. I did not ask any of them to step aside. And I believe that, again, we vaulted over all of the candidates save one. And so it shows that we're competitive, even under the usual circumstances. And just as someone who's made history very recently and had to knock down a lot of barriers to do it, I know I'm going to get there one way or another, and nothing is going to prevent that from happening.
Do you think that May should have resigned herself and let you run in her riding instead?
No, definitely not. We're only headed in one direction, and that is up. That's growth. And so I wouldn't want to substitute myself for an outstanding parliamentarian. I'm looking to join her as opposed to substituting her. So yes, the people in Saanich Gulf Island, they love her. She's done a fantastic job. She's been elected 3 times there. No, I'm not. I'm definitely not looking to take her place there.
Will you take a shot somewhere else if the opportunity arises?
Well, this is, the Green Party. One of the things that sets us apart is that the leader is not the one making all of the decisions, not even about their own lives. And so in my case, it's going to be a discussion early next week, beginning next week, with our caucus, with our leadership, with our members about where and when it's going to make sense for me to run next. I'll definitely have my thoughts, but it's such an important decision for the whole party. We want to make sure that we get it right. And so we have to look at just the whole lay of the land before deciding, and we have to do it together.
I know it's been done before, but doesn't it make your job harder if you don't have a seat?
It's been done before, as you said. It's a mix. It's really a mix. The day after the by-election, on the one hand, I thought, I wish that I was going to Ottawa. I wish that I was going to represent the residents of Toronto Centre. It certainly would be nice to be with my caucus. But on the other hand, there's still a lot of building to do. We're a major party, but in some ways we're still a startup. And so having the freedom and flexibility not to have to work around committee work and other parliamentary work or constituency work, that also has some advantages as well. So either way, I was going to make the most of it, and I'll definitely find a lot of ways to build the party until I get a seat.
And just to push back a little bit, don't you think, though, that you not having a seat there is going to make it harder for you, your ability to hold the government accountable?
Well, we have a caucus, and they're doing a very good job of that. And certainly, we meet a couple times a week to talk about our positions that we're going to take, our statements that we're going to take. And, one of the advantages for the Green Party of having a leader that is in Toronto is I have much more ready access to the media than Elizabeth did out in BC. And I'm just, 3-4 hours away from Ottawa if I never ever need to have a press conference there. So I have opportunities to make sure that our voice is heard, our views are heard, even if I'm not in Parliament. And of course, Parliament isn't functioning in the way that it normally does in any case because of the pandemic.
Elizabeth May was leader for 14 years. Has she given you any advice about your role, your new role?
Sure, and having her there is just a huge benefit. She not only was she the leader for so many years, but she has such an extraordinary wealth of institutional knowledge about Parliament, about its procedures. And so having her there, having her be our parliamentary leader until I'm able to get in is just a bonus. And we're in regular touch. As I said, I speak with the caucus every couple of days. And I made it very clear to Elizabeth, I'm going to keep tapping into that knowledge base for as long as I can. And I know she wants to run in the next election as well. So I'm going to have access to that for a long time.
Well, before your win, in an interview with the Toronto Star, May said that she wouldn't rule out running again as leader, and also said that the Green Party is defined by the grassroots formational policy, and there are no whipped votes in Parliament. The leader has very little scope to set policy and won't be able to direct her and the other two Green MPs in the House of Commons. And this is a quote: "You're the chief spokesperson. You're not the boss." It's important, again, to note that she said that before you were selected, so it wasn't directed at you. But now that you're leader, does that undermine your ability to lead the Green Party?
Well, we have a great relationship, and I will say that, all of those things are correct. And the Green Party is a different party. We work by consensus. These are things that really were initially or traditionally, historically, had been a part of our parliamentary democracy and have just been undermined over time. The leader of the party is not supposed to have all of the power. The leader of the party is supposed to, as much as possible, work by consensus. And we have a member base, and they're the ones that drive our policy and our policy development process. And so these are the reasons I joined the party in the first place. I really celebrate them. I think that they're very healthy for the democracy of our party, but also democracy in general. And I'll tell you, this is how good public policy happens. It does not happen when all the ideas and all the initiative comes from just one person.
What will be your top priority now for the Green Party?
It always has to be winning more seats. Greens, we have an exponential impact on policy as is. But every time a new Green is elected, we get the opportunity to have more impact, to be a bigger voice in the room when decisions are taken. We're a political party. And so my goal really between now and the next election is to help create the conditions that are going to allow us to win more seats.
I wanted to go over some of your plan, and here's part of what your plan says. Reinforce our national carbon tax and rebate program, introduce a border carbon adjustments mechanism, invest in deep retrofits, clean tech, large-scale green infrastructure, and carbon capture technology. Why are market-based solutions the way to go?
Well, we want to, we have a very short period of time before we run out of time in terms of tackling the climate emergency. It's still very concerning to me and our members that the government has not chosen to identify and fix targets that correspond to the science. and to put a plan in place to get us there. And so I'm very excited. When I see those slides, I'm very excited because we can see that we have the opportunity right here, right now, under our existing system to do so much in the 10 years that we have left to really reduce our greenhouse gases by at least 60%. So, these are all innovative things. We have some world leaders in Canada in all of those areas, and the Green Party wants to see those things happen. These are not, by the way, none of these are exclusive. If there are new strategies that come along, new innovations that come along, this is one of the things about the Green Party. We're ready to embrace them. But we know that those three things that you mentioned are some of the most impactful things we can do now to tackle the climate emergency.
Well, some of these proposals are similar to what the Liberals promised in their recent throne speech. How do you distinguish yourselves from them?
Well, as I said, the Liberals have no plan and they have no target. You can't get to where you're going if you don't even acknowledge where you need to get. The Liberals did not propose and this was one of the reasons we could not support the speech from the throne. The targets that they have are targets that they inherited. They're 50% of what they need to be to get us get our greenhouse gases reduced to the point where we can prevent runaway warming, global warming. They did not propose a carbon border adjustment. That's a very impactful innovation that was not in there either. Their carbon tax is wonderful, and it's something that we proposed before they did. But of course, they need to make sure that they are increasing it at regular increments until it produces its efficiencies. And they did not, that was also not mentioned. So in all of the respects, if you look at all of those bullet points, and if you look at our climate targets, the Liberals and I are still I'm so sorry.
The party?
The Liberals and the party are still very, very far apart.
During the campaign, you talked about experiencing racism and anti-Semitism. And of your party, you've actually said, and this is a quote, there is no question that the Green Party has work to do in addressing racism, anti-Semitism, systemic discrimination in all its forms. How do you move forward in addressing that in your own party while also navigating it day to day?
Well, one of the things that the Green Party did when they elected me was to say, we agree. We agree that we want to address diversity in particular. We didn't run a very diverse slate of candidates, for instance, in the last election. And, as long as I have some time to work on that with our membership and with our council, we're going to definitely do better the next time. Everyone, as far as I can tell, or almost everyone, is very supportive of the objective of making sure that the Green Party reflects the true diversity of Canada. And so that work, I think, it's already underway and is going to continue. And I think that I have a lot of support in doing that. And then if we can reflect that internally, then it's something that we can encourage externally as well. There's no question that having someone that looks like me with my lived experience at the highest level of politics in this country is going to make it easier to have those conversations. And I'm certainly going to make sure that those end up on the here I'm going to say it, on the agenda. And it's not identity politics. It's really just what we need to do to keep our democracy healthy and strong. It is something that we all should be invested in because we all benefit from it.
I'm going to set my objectivity as a journalist aside, and I hope the audience can give me some grace in this, but I'm ready to take it. I think it's so significant that you are the first Black leader of a party in Canada, and that you're a woman. So, and for me to be able to talk to you, it's just like it's such I'm thrilled. You are the first Black person to lead a major party, and you're the first Jewish woman. Do you feel a certain pressure to represent both of those communities as leader in Canada?
Well, first, I'll say right back at you, because I don't get the chance to be interviewed very often by Black women. There are still a lot of mountains to climb and a lot of professions that really matter, and that have a very important role to play shaping the dialogue. And with that, I'm going to have to ask you to ask the question again because I was so focused on how proud I am of you. I
Oh,
didn't hear the question.
I'm going to start crying. Do you feel the pressure to represent both communities?
I do, and it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way for you or for me. Our communities, because it's a diaspora and we don't all come from the same place. But the Black communities are, we're not a monolith. And, we saw that recently. We had Dr. Lewis who ran for the Conservatives. At the same time that I was running for the Green Party. I think we can all agree that there are many significant political differences between our two parties, yet there we both were. And so it shouldn't be that whether I succeed or fail will have a lasting impact on the chances of other women like myself that put themselves forward. But we know that it does. And so certainly I do feel that responsibility to do well. I do feel that responsibility to make sure that it's easier for the next person. And I'm going to try my very best to do that because I do want this door to be permanently open. And, we know that's not the case. We had a lot of female premiers not that long ago, much more gender balance, and that's gone. All of our premiers now, with the exception of our premier in the territories, they're all men, they're all white. All of our leaders, save me, at the federal level of the major parties, they're all men. And so we can't take for granted that these doors remain open, even once we've gone through them the one time.
Well, congratulations, and hopefully now you'll get some rest. Maybe have some candy, overdose on candy this weekend. We really appreciate your time, Annamie. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. It's wonderful. I feel, really at home with the agenda, and I hope you'll invite me back again really soon.
Definitely. Take care.
Thank you.
Just as this pandemic has revealed many weak points in our society, it's also prompted some interesting initiatives. And where food security is concerned, our Ontario hubs recently looked at 2 projects that aim to grow more food locally. With us now on that, in Red Rock on the north shore of Lake Superior, Charnel Anderson, who covers the northwestern part of the province, and covering Hamilton Niagara from Hamilton, Justin Chandler. Welcome both to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So you guys both looked at technology that is looking to change traditional farming. I'll start with you, Charnel. Tell us about the approach to farming that you reported on.
Right. So I wrote about container farms, which are sometimes also called vertical farms. I believe the technical term is growth chamber. But what it is just one form of controlled environment agriculture, which is exactly what it sounds like. So it's food that's produced in a controlled environment. As you can see here, this is what they look like. It's essentially a repurposed shipping container. So it's outfitted with shelving units and a hydroponic growing system that uses water instead of soil. And so it produces a variety of different produce, mainly leafy greens, though. So stuff like lettuce, kale, spinach, different herbs. And quite often manufacturers, and the media does this as well, they tout these container farms as a solution to food insecurity in remote communities. These are places where the growing season is shorter, the winters are longer. So for my story, I wanted to examine that claim and whether container farms really are a solution to food insecurity in these places.
All right, I'm going to jump to Justin. You looked at similar technology, but tell us it's being applied a little differently. Tell us about that.
Yes, as you said, essentially it's the same sort of controlled environment agriculture that Charnel was talking about. But in the case of what I was looking at, it's being applied more straight up. So instead of having a container, these are often more facilities. So for example, one that I'm looking at in Niagara is 13 floors. So you're getting the same technology just on a bigger scale, often to feed a larger community. And a lot of the ones in Southern Ontario are centered around the GTA. So I was looking at sort of how those are going to be applied to help people who live in that community.
Now, something that Charnel had touched on is that, this is relatively new technology, but there might be some limits when we talk to its application in rural and remote communities. Charnel, what do you think some of the benefits are from remote communities, and is there some limits to that?
Right. So, I mean, in terms of the benefits, I think the biggest draw of this technology is that it can be used to grow food anywhere. It was originally developed as a technology used to grow food in space. Uh, so, you can get these container farms, plop them down, plug them in, whether that's in the desert or in the Arctic, and they'll grow food. Um, in terms of some of the drawbacks, though, just because it can grow food anywhere doesn't mean it grows the kind of food that people want to eat, nor is it the way that people want to grow their food all the time. As you know, food is a big part of culture, from what we eat to how we prepare it. Our relationship to food is a big part of who we are. So, particularly when it comes to addressing food insecurity in remote First Nation communities, we need to take those cultural and social elements into account. For example, in many Indigenous communities, traditional or country food tends to be wild food, so stuff like caribou or moose, which as of yet can't be grown in a container farm.
Right. Justin, I want to throw that question to you. In terms of this technology, what are the benefits when we think of remote communities, rural communities, say, in the Niagara area?
Well, as it stands right now, a lot of communities in the Niagara area that are more remote, they have a lot of farmland that they can grow on, and that's still the current better option. So what these ones are doing is more hoping to get food to people who live in cities where they don't have close driving access to farms and to agriculture. And part of that reason is just that these are such big facilities right now that you can't necessarily put a huge vertical farm or a container farm just anywhere, because the infrastructure and the energy costs are very expensive. So we're still, I think, early stages. And as Charnel says, there's only so much lettuce, kale, arugula that people can eat, and that's what people are growing right now. One of the experts in controlled agriculture that I spoke to at the University of Guelph, Mike Dixon, he said lettuce is only food when you add ranch dressing. So that's sort of his joke on it. But we're not at the stage where we can easily grow berries or protein or these other things that people would usually consider their staples at the grocery store.
You know, when this technology first came out about 3 years ago, we had done a profile of a vertical farm or a shipping container out in Chelmsford, Sudbury, and this was touted as potentially the big solution to food insecurity in northern areas. Justin, do you think that this can be replicated to address that, or is this just one piece to the puzzle?
I think we're likely looking at one piece of the puzzle. I think Charnel could probably speak to it better than I can, but my understanding is that until this becomes more sustainable, and it has become more sustainable in recent years as the cost, for example, of lighting has gone down. LEDs are much more efficient, and you can actually put these on in a greenhouse and leave them on all day. But we still need that infrastructure.
Charnel, you know, your piece on tvo.org looked at a community on Manitoulin Island. You know, was this, they brought this in during the pandemic, and this was a conversation that they had before that. What have they been saying in terms of its solution to bringing fresh produce to the area?
Right. So this community on Manitoulin Island it's on the west side. So it's about a 2-hour drive back to the mainland, and it's 40 minutes to the closest grocery store. So it's quite remote. But by all accounts, they're happy with their product. They've yet to actually harvest food yet, but when they do, they're planning on doing a subscription style weekly box that community members can sign up for, and they'll get the fresh produce delivered right to their door.
And something that you touched on was this, in terms of the concept of colonialism. When we look at how this shipping container and this technology, kind of works with traditional farming, are people open to this idea? Or, in terms of the connection that we have with food, Indigenous cultures have a very spiritual connection with food. How does that play into this?
Right. So one of the sources that I spoke to, Alex Wilson, she's a member of Opaskwayak Cree Nation in northern Manitoba, and she made an interesting observation. She was talking to me about the spirituality of food and the lack thereof in food that's grown in containers. So she compared it to clear cutting old growth forests. When you cut all the old trees, which Alex says are the elders, so when you cut all those old trees, you take them out of the forest, how does the next generation of trees know how to be trees? because there's no older trees around for them to learn from. It's similar to humans passing knowledge between generations. And Alex says that they don't know how to be trees. You know, they were just planted there, and they don't have that same transmission of knowledge that they would had there been older trees around for them to learn from. And she says this is similar to what's happening in container farms. The plants are missing that spiritual dimension. They don't have that knowledge that they would have acquired had they grown out in the wild. So she says that wild food nourishes you different than the food that comes from container farms.
Some very interesting stuff. I want to thank you guys both, Justin Chandler and Charnel Anderson, both Ontario Hub journalists. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The agenda this week learned why Canadian expats are an untapped resource for this country, debated whether it's time to ditch the monarchy, and spoke to Jan Arden about the joys of aging. The agenda's week in review begins assessing the Ontario government's struggle to communicate its COVID-19 message to the province.
I get lots of emails and phone calls from people asking me questions and telling me their experiences. And I'll just repeat one that I have heard probably more than any other one recently, and then get you to weigh in on this. Once upon a time, when the province reopened gymnasiums, hockey rinks, fitness facilities, they did not require mask use, and then we had outbreaks, and then they shut everything down. Well, in the 4 jurisdictions where we've gone to modified stage 2. But then they reopened dance studios. And of course, schools are still open with 30 kids in a class where there are 30 desks, and you know, they're not 2 meters apart. But movie theaters are shut down where even if 10 people are in a cinema of 250 seats, that's unacceptable. Can you please make sense of all of that for us?
Nobody can make sense of that. There's too much internal inconsistency. There ought to have been one simple rule applied starting from Labor Day, if not earlier, which is unless you live in the same household, you do not be indoors with anyone without a mask, full stop. And for situations where you might be in a larger place with people for some period of time, then we need to work out guidelines for that. For example, movie theaters. But the way the rules have been announced and enacted, not based on evidence at all, not based on emerging evidence, and not explained to people. So no, I'm afraid I cannot make sense of those.
Heidi, do you see either simplicity or consistency in any of those decisions from the province of Ontario?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, it's a massive problem that people can't understand the guiding philosophy behind why some things are open and shut.
Matt, how about you?
I've written a column about this for TVO.org where I talked about the emails I get from all the various extracurricular or athletic activities my kids are involved in. Not only can I make sense of it, the people who have to make sense of it can't make sense of it. One example I noted was that my 8-year-old daughter went to a gymnastics program that was indoors, and they were shut down when we went to modified stage 2. But it took about a week for the owners of the gymnastics studio to figure out if they, under the law, were a gym, which is the root which is adapted from gymnastics, or if they were an indoor recreation facility. And depending on which one they were legally, different rules and conditions would have applied. And it took them about a week to figure this out. I was getting constant, almost daily emails from them going, we don't know if we're open. We don't know if we're open. And they eventually decided that they were not open. They eventually did close down. But if you have good faith efforts by business owners and facility operators to figure out what the rules are, and it needs 7 to 10 days and meetings with city officials and their local MPPs to do it, that's a sign of a system that is simply not working.
The top doc in this province is David Williams. He's the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the province of Ontario. Let's listen to a little bit of something he recently had to say about these issues. Sheldon, if you would.
In the first wave, when they did case contact management, they had an average of 10 to 12 people that were contacts of the case. Now they say it's quite common to have 50 to 60 to 70, even up to 100 of a case. That's saying the last 5 to 7 days you were in close contact with. And my thinking is, I don't understand that. Why would you have that kind of thing? What did you not understand about our messaging? And if you get a sense, there's somewhat of frustration, because to me, the messaging has been said and said again. It's so clear, it's obvious.
Amanda, the messaging is so clear, it's obvious. As a communication strategy, would you recommend that to a client?
No. And, I'm sure I know Dr. David Williams is working very hard behind the scenes, as all the people there are. But I think, anyone who's watched his press conferences, and I've watched more than a few, would admit that communications is not his strong suit. And I think that's one of the big problems here is we get clips like this, which are, there's the gif of Julia Roberts looking at the ceiling trying to figure out what math equations going around. I cannot make head or tail of what he says half the time. And part of what happens then is that then shifts the burden of communication onto the politicians, who are driven by the whims of different regions and different electoral districts. And of course, I think politicians have a role to play in making these calls, but not to have a strong person to be able to communicate with you from a medical perspective, I think is really hurting us as a province. And it's forcing a lot of this on political actors who frankly aren't equipped to make these kind of calls either.
Colin, what's your view of Dr. Williams' communication abilities?
I think his poor communication isn't the problem, it's a symptom of the problem. I don't think he understands public health the way we need him to. He doesn't seem to understand testing strategy. He definitely doesn't understand social network theory and bubbling. His recommendations run counter to first principles and common sense so often that it would be impossible for anyone, I think, to explain that really clearly. Since July, I've been asking him to vacate his office. He is not up to the job based on the experience and expertise he does not have.
Okay, let's, Sheldon, can I ask you for a four-shot here? Can we see all the guests at once? Can I see a show? Okay, Colin has gone on the record here, as he has for many months. Can I see a show of hands? How many people think the medical officer of health for the province of Ontario ought to be replaced immediately? Hands up, please. Okay, Colin's got a hand up. I see Heidi is on the fence. The other two are not. Matt, how come you're not calling for his resignation?
I'm not convinced there's anyone better to replace him with at this time. If you look coast to coast across this country, we've had two standout public health officers in BC and Alberta, and in the second wave, both those provinces are struggling. They did fairly well in the first wave. They're taking it on the chin this wave. If I was confident there was someone better waiting in the wings that we could, yank Dr. Williams, send him off to a well-earned retirement, and put in someone new, I would do it. Like, you know me, Steve. I don't mind firing a hockey coach if the season's not going the way it needs to. I don't mind doing that at all. But I would need to be convinced that that would lead to an upgrade. And I would think right now there is absolutely a very real chance that it would take a bad situation and make it worse. I don't assume the problems in Ontario right now are the result of Dr. Williams, and I do not assume that removing him would immediately make any improvement. We're in the middle of a second wave right now, and sometimes you go to war with the soldiers you have, not the ones you want. And for better or worse, here we are.
I think that the idea of using Canadians at all levels while they are abroad to better our home country is something that John and the book and this idea of Planet Canada is going to pay off for us exponentially over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And in particular, what kind of drove it home for me was the idea of us not fretting so much about whether we are experiencing brain drain or brain gain, something that we always talk about when we talk about expats and Canadians going and living abroad. Oftentimes there's this fretting about Canadians leaving our country and then leaving the talent and expertise that they have with them. And I think that John's idea and the whole thesis that no, in fact, Canadians that go abroad, it is brain gain for Canada. And if we are intentional about reaching out and connecting, not just to the CEOs and heads of companies and heads of institutions that live abroad, but Canadians of all walks of life, all expertise at all levels of their careers that are abroad, and drawing them into the future of Canada and the Canadian story that we are trying to create in our hometowns, then in fact, what we are doing is building this 11th, this 13th province and territory, I'd like to say, that can really benefit richly to our domestic experience, Canadian experience, but also this idea of our global Canadian experience and the global footprint that we want to leave as Canada.
And just to pick up on what Nadia was saying, Kirsten, when we do think when Canadians leave the country, we think of it maybe as a loss. Should we change how we look at that and look at it more as of a gain, as Nadia was suggesting?
Absolutely. And I think this idea of a cycle, I think, John points that out in the book around the fact that this is not about a brain drain or brain loss. This is a brain cycle. And going out into the world and then coming back to Canada, I know myself, I've done that about 3 or 4 times. I've left the country, gone to find, some great jobs to do internationally. I tend to always come back. And I think, there hopefully is a benefit back to the country when people like myself decide that, they've had a great experience overseas or in another country and, have learned a lot and can bring some of that back to the country, including those networks that we built internationally. Like, I think there is that sense of a brain cycle, which is so powerful.
You said that you always come back. Is that because of family or is it because Canada is home?
Canada is home. And yeah, I do have family here, but I also have family globally. And I think for so many of us, I think the wonderful thing about Canada is we are a nation of largely immigrants. And so whether it's ourselves or our parents who have come to Canada, there is this sense of a constant looking to globally. Like, I think we're global citizens, and there is this kind of home. There's a homebodiness about what we experience as well, and I think sometimes we miss home when we're away from it. And as much as we can be proud of being, in this world and being global, there is something about coming home too. And I've always done it. I'll be curious to see if I do it again this time.
And Andrea, I saw you nodding your head.
Yeah, definitely, because so many of us are children of different cultures, as John said in his book as well. My parents they moved to Canada from the UK and both have Guyanese roots, and I'm first generation Canadian. So I grew up with a lot of other first generation Canadians. And I think growing up, I probably felt a little bit more Guyanese than Canadian. And when I moved to the States, I think it was even more important for me to know, to really shout that I'm Canadian. And especially having small children, making sure that they know that they're as Canadian as they are American as well. So, I think being a first generation Canadian also gives us the opportunity or gives us this different, I'd say we're maybe a little bit more empathetic to different cultures as well. And I think that helps us when we're in the US and other places overseas.
And Jeremy, was there anything in particular that John said that you strongly related to?
Yeah, well, I think that he had a great idea to mention the C100, these tech geniuses in the Silicon Valley who have banded together. They're all Canadian, and they help Canadians in the Silicon Valley, and they go back to Canada and help. There could be there's all this goodwill. People go away, they're away, they feel more Canadian, they want to help. We could have a kind of M100 for people in media and sports like Christine and Andrea, and an F100 for people in food, and an H100 for people in health. Here at Oxford alone, Professor Sir John Bell is leading the charge to get a vaccine for the coronavirus, and he's way higher than I am, but I'm also not bad at what I do. So there's all this opportunity and this goodwill. So being intentional about it, as Nadia said, it should be a pretty easy task that could pay huge dividends.
What does the monarchy, in your view, provide Canadians?
Well, I think a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary democracy is a very stable form of government. The Crown, as representing the state, as embodied by the Queen, is a very, I believe, has provided this country with a very stable, as I said, overarching sense of government that has provided continuity. The Crown has a history of protecting minorities in this country. And I think that as the Queen embodies the state, if you look at a republic, for example, the president is the personification of the state, of the government in a republic. And if the president is dysfunctional, then the government is dysfunctional because it is so such a personal thing. And, we only have to look to that great republic to our south to see that when the president is dysfunctional, you do have problems arising where you can't even guarantee the peaceful transference of power, as we're now seeing during this election.
Okay, Peter Donolo, let me ask you the same question. What, in your view, does the monarchy provide to Canada?
Well, listen, I think the monarchy is an anachronism. There was a case for it, certainly in our early years as a country, 150 years ago. But my basic problems with the monarchy are twofold. One is that I don't believe that high public office, any public office, but particularly the head of state, high public office, should be hereditary, should be passed from one generation to another within a single family. I think that's fundamentally undemocratic and at odds with a modern democracy. And secondly, to add insult to injury, this is a British monarchy. It's a foreign institution. They're foreigners who are our heads of state. I think Queen Elizabeth is a figure of tremendous. She's a very impressive person. She's kept this institution going much longer than it should have. I think we should adopt a practice from the NHL and the other major leagues. And when she goes, we should retire her jersey.
Well, that's a nice analogy. Let me ask the follow-up question, which is your former boss, Jean Chrétien, had a lovely relationship with the Queen of England. How does he feel about your taking this position?
He still does. He's only the sixth member, only the sixth Canadian ever to be on the Order of Merit, which is the only order that the Queen personally chooses. He's only the third Canadian Prime Minister to be there. He's known her for about 60 years, or certainly 50 years. So he's a monarchist. He and I disagree. He would also feel that this is not a top-of-mind issue for most Canadians, and in that he's right. But listen, that's always the case with issues like this. We're kind of like, we don't want to deal with it because it's too much trouble. We're like the millennial kid living in the parents' basement because it's easy. It's easier than moving out. Well, we were very slow in adopting a lot of the usual vestiges of independence. It took us almost 100 years as a country before we adopted our own flag. But we slowly but surely we've done these things. The monarchy is the last item of unfinished business in this regard, and we should check it off the list.
Delia, what's your view on what the monarchy provides to Canada?
My view on what the monarchy provides to Canada is with respect to Indigenous people, in that the original treaties were signed with the representatives of the Crown in earlier years in the right of Great Britain, and later on in right of Canada, and in Ontario in right of both Canada and Ontario. And for that reason, symbolically, it's very important for many Indigenous people, especially the elders, to maintain that relationship with the Crown. However, my perspective is that the duties that ensued from the treaties have been taken over by the Crown and right of Canada and the Crown and right of the different provinces. And so if there was a republic, the duties or the enforcements required to ensure that the treaties continue between the original Great Britain pre-Confederation would continue in any case, because the courts have ruled many times that the duties are embedded in the Crown and right of Canada and in the Crown and right of the provinces. And so that would remain.
And my mom was no, and I think it's because she looked at her own life and went, I hope you want more than this. And it was heartbreaking and pivotal for me at the same time. But she also said to me in my 20s, when I was starting to do music, why not you? Why not you? And because I had a mom that championed me and accepted me and cheered me on despite a massive thing in the world telling me that I couldn't do it, that I shouldn't be able to. Because I had her voice ringing in my head when I didn't have my own. So that was a big part of my story and continues to be. My mom informs my life and my decisions every single day, and she's been gone a couple of years now.
I think that's her picture over your left shoulder, is it not?
That's me in the back of a book, but I think my mom is here Here's my mom.
There we go. Well,
Yeah.
there were those two quotes you gave of your mother's are great, but there was a third one that I wrote down because I thought it was very compelling as well, and that one was, if you can't be brave, be reckless. Now, are those are not the words I would have thought that would come out of the mouth of a mom in rural Alberta in the 1960s or 70s. What did you infer from those?
Well, I think my mom had stolen that from my Aunt Ern, my great Aunt Ern. So it was my mother's aunt, and she was about 4'0". And my Aunt Ern was a person that would jump off a bridge or drive a car through a fire. And I think she had a lot of influence on my mom. And to me, that always just meant, just do it. Just worry about it's easier to beg forgiveness than ask for permission. I think that's kind of what I gleaned from that. And sometimes, recklessness is the absence of bravery. But I feel like they work in tandem. I really do, Steve. Sometimes a reckless conjures up, someone not caring and not being aware of the lives they're affecting around them. But I think you can be insulated and still be reckless and not, hurt other people. But that was my mom. I didn't always understand everything she said to me, that's for sure.
I want to put one of your dad's quotes to you as well, because he had something that I jotted down here as well. He said, the worst marriages don't end in divorce. They don't end.
Don't end.
Which is a pretty, it's a pretty out there thing for somebody who was married for 60 years to be saying, right? So what did you infer from that?
I think the fact that people feel martyred, I think sometimes in marriages, maybe my parents were cut from a cloth where you stay together no matter what. And my mom said, well, we just felt like we had more together than we did apart, and neither of us wanted to start over again. But she did kick him out at one point. I think 15, 20 years into their marriage, she booted him out of the house, and because of his drinking, obviously. But my dad, as much as he joked, a lot of the time there was a lot of truth in his very bizarre sense of humor. He used to always tell me, first the man, he takes the drink, then the drink, he takes the man. And that always stuck with me too, in a haunting kind of a way. It stole so much of his life. Even when he quit drinking, he resented it so much that he was kind of a miserable guy. My friend Stephanie called him the goddammit guy.
But your mother would only call him the GD guy because she never swore, right?
She didn't swear until she got Alzheimer's, and then she said things that I never ever thought I'd hear coming out of her mouth. But my God, did we laugh.
Well, let me get back on the drugs and alcohol issue, because, and I can't remember who said this. It might have been your dad. You might have heard it from someone else. People who abuse drugs and alcohol are practicing how to die. That must have hit you hard, eh?
It did. And I never wanted to be like my dad. I figured if I didn't drink rum, that I would never be like him. That's what he drank all the time, and he always smelled of rum. If rum was the last thing in a minibar, I wouldn't drink it, even if I was desperate, if that tells you anything. I think any kid that witnesses an alcoholic parent and the unilateral damage that drinking does in a family, I just feel for them so much. I regret so many of the things that I did in my life. I just always thought that I had control of alcohol and that it wasn't a problem. And it was because I didn't drink like my dad that I thought I was okay. I was kind of a binger. I wasn't one of those people that woke up and started drinking in the morning. So I thought, I can't be an alcoholic if I'm not like that. Because my dad drank every day, all day. When I did drink, which was, maybe a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, I sort of wasted myself. But then I wouldn't drink for 4 days. And I thought, see, I don't have a problem. I'm fine. And that's just not how alcohol works. I always say to people that ask me about stopping drinking, and I get asked all the time, how did you stop? That's always a telling question to me if they're coming to me and asking me that. My answer to them is always, if you have looked in a mirror at any time in your life, recently, not so recently, and if you've said to yourself, in that moment, with you, your toothbrush, and the mirror, and you've said, "You're drinking too much. You're drinking too much, Jan." I said that to myself so many times over the years. Don't give up trying. Don't give up trying to stop, because that voice gets quieter and quieter and quieter as you progress in a disease like alcoholism. Any kind of addiction, that voice gets quieter. But I got lucky. I just had the sense to stop doing it, and I'm very grateful.
That's just some of what we covered this week on The Agenda. For more, including the full conversations, you can visit our website, tvo.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed, twitter.com/theagenda. And that's it for this Friday, October 30th, 2020. Next week is a doozy. We'll consider the American election results, debate stripping names such as John A. Macdonald's from public buildings, and analyze the Ontario budget, which comes down on Thursday. I'm Annamie Kiwanuka. Thank you for watching TVO and for joining us online at tvo.org. Have a safe and happy Halloween. Eat all the candy, and Steve will see you again on Monday.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. Ontario Hubs are made possible by the Barry and Laurie Green Family Charitable Trust and Goldie Feldman. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Looking for more of TVO's in-depth current affairs and documentaries? Visit tvo.org/daily and sign up for our daily newsletter with links to agenda interviews, Steve Paikin's blogs, and preview our upcoming documentaries. That's all at tvo.org/daily.